All right, today, guys, I want to go ahead and show you how to make a dynamic UI list in Unity through code. It's very easy. It's very beneficial for you, primarily because let's say you have a list and you don't know if you want 10 or 20 or 100 items or more, in the list. Normally, you'd have to create the UI element, and then after you create the UI element, then you'd have to go ahead and hide the other ones. So if you only have 20 elements and there's 21 in your list now, well, that's a problem, right? So in specific, I'm going to show how to make it so it's dynamic, so you don't have to worry about that issue. I'm going to do it with the load menu. This is from some old code we have with Starcatcher. The biggest thing to remember, there's a lot of things in here, so I'm going to point out the biggest things that are important. So this prefab right here, this is important. This is actually a UI prefab. If you don't know what a prefab is, there's a lot of YouTube tutorials showing you how to make prefab UIs in Unity. But this is the prefab. This is important because this is telling me what it's going to look like and where it's going to go. So if you do this correctly and you put the right prefab in here, it's just going to populate the right list on the screen exactly where you want it, exactly the way you want it to look. So make sure you look up a tutorial for that if you're unfamiliar with prefabs. But for our purposes, it's very, very easy to use. The other thing that's going to be very important here is I have a saved games list and a games list. Those are going to be used in here. Probably the saved games list is going to be a little bit more important. But anyways, let's go ahead and go down to the start function. So in the start function, the first thing that I do, as you guys see, is I call get games. And get games is extremely important because I might use this method, I might use this logic somewhere else, and if I modify it, I don't want to copy and if I copy it and paste it, I don't want to go ahead and change all of these modifications. I don't have to copy and paste again. I might forget a specific location. So always make a method to condense your work. That's just some basic 101 programming. So with get games, I'm coming down in here. You guys have seen this portion before of the code. This is the loading portion of the code, which is extremely important. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take all of the names, which are really important to me, because that's how I can load the new game. And so I take all of those files, and then once I've created all of these save files, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to create each item in the list from these files, because this is what dictates how many files I'm going to have. So I'm going to go ahead and here I'm going to say, hey, for each one of these strings, each in my list of files, I'm going to go ahead and create a new game object. So usually you see the UI, the drag and drop, that's how you create a new game object up here in Unity. This is just the same thing, but behind the scenes on the code. So I'm going to have to create first the game object. Second, I'm going to have to create the text item for the text that I'm going to do. And I'm going to also going to go ahead and create the visual element, which is important for what I'm about to do. So then with the new object that we've created up here, right, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to first instantiate, and this is a special method from Unity. And I have to cast it as a game object. So that's what these parentheses mean right here. Is this means I'm casting it, forcing whatever comes out here to be a game object, because it could be just a variable of var, but we want to handle it like a game object. So I'm going to go ahead and toss in the prefab, which is what I want it to look like, and I'm going to transform my new object to be what the prefab is. That way I don't have to define the size, the length, or anything else. I don't have to do all that hard stuff behind the code, which is really difficult. I can just do it in the UI, and then I can handle it all right here using the instantiate. The next thing that we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and get the component in the children, and this is specific to me because I know that it is a child of my object, my text object, and that might be different for you. So just make sure you go ahead and check that out. If you have questions about that, feel free to ask me. And I'm going to go ahead and add the save name in there so that it actually shows what I'm trying to load. And then finally, I'm going to go ahead, and this is a very complicated piece of code. I'm not going to go in depth. If you know what it means, I don't need to go in depth anyways. Just copy this piece of code if you're interested in it. So next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I have a button attached to this. So this is not a child. This is just get component. So I'm getting component. I'm going to get the UI button, and I have to classify it here, UI Unity engine.ui.button, and I'm going to specifically get the onClick. So what happens when it clicks? I'm going to add a listener, and this basically allows me to add a method to it to handle what happens. And you can see I've got this defined down here with all the information in it. And this delegate right here, delegate's basically lambda. If you guys have ever done lambda calculus, if you've ever done anything with lambdas, you probably know what I'm talking about. If not, don't worry about it. Just know that it has to be right here. And you then surround your new method that you want to call with the curly fries, as I so sweetly call them. And this is the new method. And that method will be defined in the class that you are using. So as you can see, again, I have it defined down here. You have to define it. So what this does is basically just allows me, whenever this new button, this new UI object that is created, it allows me to handle it with an onClick event. This, of course, can apply to a ton of different situations. So I just wanted to showcase off this, which is why it's really useful to show off the load menu in specific. And then finally, I go ahead and add everything to a saved games list, and that's primarily because I want to be able to manage my data later. And as you can see up here, after get games is called, we're going to return back here. We're going to come down in here for every game. So it's a game object, game in the saved games list. I'm going to go ahead and add to my games list that game object. And this just helps me be able to handle it later on when I'm trying to actually load the game. Because right now I've just got a visual element, but then I have the logical code below to handle the actual loading and putting the player where they're supposed to be. But for this tutorial, I just wanted to show you guys these two methods. Extremely important, extremely easy, and it opens up a large array of possibilities for you guys, because then you don't have to hide certain elements, you don't have to worry about the length of lists, you don't have to calculate that beforehand. It can all just be dynamic and easy. If you guys have any questions, again, please just let me know.